Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our Naturalist 101 series. We are so happy tonight to continue that series with Aurora Fowler from Little St. Simon's Island. She is the Ecological Coordinator. She's been out there for 2 years, helping with all the projects. We're going to hear so much more about that tonight. So we're so happy you're here and joining us.
Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you. Okay. Hi, everybody. Like Stephanie said, my name's Aurora, and I work on Little St. Simon's as the Ecological Coordinator there. So, I'm going to be just chatting a little bit about the island, but I like to start this talk by zooming out and thinking a little bit big picture first. So if any of you are interested in looking closer at this map, that is one of the maps that's back by the refreshments. So what we're looking at here is the Altamaha River Corridor. So if you're familiar with some Georgia geography, you might be familiar with this corridor. So this blue line right here is the Altamaha River, and it's one of the largest undammed watersheds on the eastern seaboard. So it's a really important freshwater source. What we're looking at here is a map of protected lands along this river corridor. So each of these colored polygons represents a different parcel of protected land along the corridor. And so I like to start this talk off by saying, one, that we are very fortunate. Little St. Simon's, we're going to be talking about number 11 right here, Little St. Simon's Island, for the rest of the talk. And we're very fortunate. Little St. Simon's is very fortunate to have some really amazing ecological environments, and we're very intact ecologically as an island, and we're very lucky. But that wouldn't be possible without each of these different partners and the collaborative conservation network that is happening here along the Georgia coast. So this is the most up-to-date map. This is all the way up till 2023. And you can see that we've protected over 200,000 acres along this river corridor, which is just an amazing testament, again, to the collaborative nature of conservation that's happening here. So you can travel up this river corridor over 50 miles, and both sides of the land along this river are protected. So it's really amazing. Okay, so now I'd like to zoom back in, and we're back on the Georgia coast. So for those of you who are familiar, we have 14 barrier islands here on the Georgia coast, Little St. Simon's being one of them. So Little St. Simon's is one of the 10 that is not accessible by car. So this is an island that's only accessible by boat. As you saw when we zoomed in, we had Sapelo Island to the north, Jekyll Island to the south. Here's St. Simon's Island, and right here is Little St. Simon's Island. So we're an 11,000 acre privately owned barrier island. So I'm going to give a little bit of human use history first to start us off. So starting back all the way back in 500 AD, from 500 AD to 1500 AD, like many of the coastal barrier islands here on Georgia, we were seasonally used by the Native Americans. So they were coming in the late summer through the fall to harvest oysters. We know this because of the presence of what we call shell middens, or these ancient piles of oyster shells where the Native Americans would have shucked and left their oyster shells when they were here. Starting back even in when the Spanish was occupying the Georgia coast, there has been history of Little St. Simon's being privately owned. So it's passed through a variety of private hands. But one of the first and most notable owners of Little St. Simon's was Major Pierce Butler. So he owned several plantations along the Georgia coast, including Little St. Simon's Island. One of the things that we're going to talk about a lot tonight is how ecologically intact Little St. Simon's is. And that really spans all the way back to some of these early owners who had the foresight to not develop the land. So we're very fortunate to have no agricultural history on Little St. Simon's. So we never had any Sea Island cotton that was grown. We never had rice fields. We do have a history of enslaved people on the island. When the island was owned by Pierce Butler, he did run it as a plantation. So we did have about 11 enslaved people who lived on Little St. Simon's for a period of time. They raised things like livestock, chickens, geese, cattle, and they grazed them on the island. Again, we're very fortunate. We didn't have any history of timbering or logging, so we have intact old growth forests. Another notable moment in our history is Fanny Kemble. So for some of you, you might be aware of Fanny Kemble. Her diary of her travels along the Georgia coast has been published now into a book. And she stopped on Little St. Simon's Island in 1839. She visited the island, and she's quoted as saying, they docked, they got onto the island, they got into a horse and buggy, and they had to bushwhack their way all the way to the beach. And as they were going in this horse and buggy, she said the air was thick with mosquitoes and sandflies. And for those of you who are laughing, you know that that's still true. That's still a reality that we experience today on Little St. Simon's. So, like I said, the island has passed through a variety of private hands, but then in 1908, the island was purchased by Eagle Pencil Company. So a surveyor from Eagle Pencil Company saw Little St. Simon's from a boat, saw a couple of cedar trees, and thought, there's probably more cedar trees over there. Let's buy it. We'll take the cedar trees and we'll make pencils. So they purchased Little St. Simon's sight unseen in 1908 for $12,500, okay? Well, they got there onto Little St. Simon's and they realized, there's not that many red cedars on the island, and all of the cedar trees are really gnarled and twisted from the salt water. So the owner of Eagle Pencil Company, Philip Berolsheimer, came down to the island in 1912 to say, what the heck did my company buy? And fell in love with the island and purchased it for his own family use in 1912. So for almost 50 years, the island was a private, personal hunting lodge for the Berolsheimer family. It opened to the public for the first time in 1979, and in those early years is when Hank and Wendy Paulson visited the island for the first time. They really fell in love with the island and sort of just the raw beauty and wild nature that they experienced there. And in 2007, Hank and Wendy became majority owners. And here we are today, present time. So what I want to talk a little bit about is just what's happening today on the island. So there are sort of two things that are existing here on Little St. Simon's today. You have what we're calling the Eco Lodge. So some of you may know that Little St. Simon's has a guest program, a guest lodge. We take no more than 32 people at a time. It's an all-inclusive resort, and so we have a kitchen there as well as a team of naturalists where you can go and you spend your time and they take you out into the nature. You get to eat your meals there, and so we have that. We also have what we call the Center for Coastal Conservation, and so that's what I work for. There are 3 of us that work for the center, and we operate on 4 different pillars at the center. We're working on land and wildlife stewardship, where we're doing things like prescribed burning and monitoring some of our rare and at-risk species. We're also doing research. We have an active research program, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. We do some education and outreach, and I love to, point out our volunteers. So we have a super awesome volunteer base on the island that really helps us be able to accomplish all of the things that we do accomplish there. And so this picture is from our Christmas bird count from last year. And so, we're really fortunate to have some amazing volunteers. And then we also are involved in regional leadership. So my boss, Scott Coleman, he is a regional leader and is involved in a variety of things like the St. Simon's Land Trust, 100 Miles. But then, of course, we're very fortunate to have a number of really amazing regional partners as well that we're very fortunate to have an amazing relationship with, like 100 Miles, the St. Simon's Land Trust, Stewards of the Georgia Coast, just to name a couple. Okay, so for the rest of the time tonight, I think how we're going to structure this talk is that I'm going to take you through some of the ecosystems on Little St. Simon's. So I'm going to walk you through what makes that ecosystem special, some of the management tactics that we have in those ecosystems, and then I'm also going to highlight one of the really cool research projects that has happened in that specific habitat. So before we dive in, I'd like to show sort of an overview of all of the ecological communities that we have on Little St. Simon's. Obviously, I'm not going to be able to get to all of them tonight, but like I said, Little St. Simon's is 11,000 acres, and so keep in mind, only about 2,500 of those 11,000 acres is upland. So when you're looking at this map, all of this sort of white area, that's all salt marsh. We have over 8,000 acres of salt marsh on Little St. Simon's. We also have beach here. We have some maritime grasslands, slash pine forests, live oak forests, and then freshwater wetlands sort of dappled throughout. So the first ecosystem that I'm going to talk about is our live oak maritime forests. So like I said, we don't have any history of logging or timbering on the island. So this is an old growth, intact live oak forest. This is an ecosystem that's dominated by live oaks, magnolias, Spanish moss, saw palmetto. So I took this video on Monday this week as we were driving down the road. So this is very recent. This is definitely what it looks like as you're driving down one of our main roads. This is the area where frequently people tell me like, oh my gosh, it feels like Jurassic Park here. So this is the oldest part of the island. And when we think about the island in terms of succession, so as the island is getting older, this is the oldest part of the island. And this is what we call the climax community. So if you think about if nothing changed in the world and we fast forwarded 500 years, this would still look the same. This is not changing. This is static. This is peak community on Little St. Simons. And so it's a really important resource for a variety of species, including, let's see if this video will play. Let me see if my video. Yeah, the northern yellow bat. Let me see if I can get this video to play. Nope, it doesn't want to. That's okay. Okay, so the northern yellow bat. This is one of North America's largest bats. And so they are found in this live oak maritime forest. So early on in our research program, we had a student from the University of Georgia who was looking at the abundance of this bat in our old growth forest compared to a forest that had been replanted. So what we might call like a second or a third growth forest. And what they found was these bats, these northern yellow bats, really prefer and had a higher selection for the old growth forests. And so it's really highlighting the importance of conserving these old growth forests. Another part of our maritime live oak forest that I'd like to talk about are our freshwater wetlands. So like I was saying, the live oak maritime forest is the oldest part of the island. And as you're driving down in this area, you might notice some rolling topography. So those are actually ancient dune ridges and swales. So the island is only about 2,500 years old. We're very young as an island, so we have very sandy soil. We haven't had time to develop a topsoil. And so a lot of times the water drains right through that super sandy soil. So when we're thinking about those swales, in those parts where the ground sort of dips down, we're getting clay particles that are accumulating in those ancient dune swales. And in those ancient dune swales is where we get our freshwater wetlands. And so this is a picture and a video of our freshwater wetlands and one of our most magnificent flora species, the Hibiscus grandiflorus. So this is called giant swamp mallow. It is North America's largest hibiscus species. So the stalks stand about 8 to 10 feet tall, and the blooms are about the size of a dinner plate. So I am on a 10-foot ladder when I took this video. And so this is a plant that would have been found extensively throughout its range in the southeast, but has been largely extirpated, unfortunately. And so Little St. Simons is one of the last places that you can see large stands of this beautiful flower. Okay, we're moving out of the live oak forest and we're moving into our maritime grasslands. So the maritime grasslands, this is a grassland that's dominated by Muhlenbergia. Muley grass are commonly called sweetgrass. So if you've read of or you've heard the book Braiding Sweetgrass, this is that grass. And so a lot of times in the fall, you might also notice this grass because it blooms these beautiful big tufts of pink seeds. And so it's an extremely important and rare endemic plant. Little St. Simons, again, is very fortunate to have such a large tract of intact maritime grasslands. And one of the ways we ensure that those grasslands stay healthy is through the use of prescribed burning. So we use prescribed fire in this system. I know maybe some of you are familiar with longleaf pine. And so longleaf pine is a system that requires fire. It needs fire to germinate seeds, to create seeds. Muley grass does not need that. It's what we call an early successional plant. So it's going to be the first plant to colonize into an area. That also means it's quickly outcompeted. So we have things like wax myrtles and groundsel that are quick to come into an area of muley grass and push that muley grass out. So to keep our grasslands intact, we use prescribed fire to push back that wax myrtle and the groundsel bush to make way for the muley grass. One of the excellent species and one of our best research projects that I love to point out in our muley grass is focused on our breeding and nesting painted buntings. So Little St. Simons is very fortunate to have such a large population of breeding painted buntings. And so we've had a very long-term project that's been studying these guys and their breeding range. And most recently, we've been using some really amazing technology to track these birds as they're breeding. And so we're able to really get an understanding of the environments and the habitats that are crucial for these birds during the most important time of their life cycle, when they're breeding, when they're reproducing. And we found that that area is the muley grass. So not only are they using the muley grass to find things to build their nests, but they're also foraging in that habitat. So they're eating the bugs that they find, they're eating any berries or seeds that they might find. And so this is muley grass. Again, it's a rare ecosystem to find. It's been largely extirpated from the coast. And so lots of folks, including Jekyll, are doing lots of restoration efforts for that. And so if you guys are familiar with Jekyll, or maybe you're going to head down there while you're here on the Georgia coast, you might see some of the muley grass restoration that they're doing there on Jekyll. And that has been in collaboration with us on Little St. Simons. So the seeds, some of the seeds for the restoration work on Jekyll have been collected on Little St. Simons. And so we really love to be able to form those kinds of partnerships and have those kinds of relationships where we can be able to be a big role in those restoration efforts. Okay, so we're moving out of the maritime grasslands and we're on to the beach. So Little St. Simons has 7 miles of beach, and we're extremely lucky to again have undeveloped beach habitat for super important species, including nesting sea turtles. And so Little St. Simons, we hire a sea turtle technician to monitor all of our nesting sea turtles. So one of the ways that we keep our beach intact is that we don't drive on the beach. So like I said, we have 7 miles, and we expect this turtle technician to cover the entire beach. So that's about an 18-mile bike ride every single day. So it's a kind of kick your butt into shape position, but we participate. And some of you maybe are familiar. I know Brian Shamblin has had a talk here. So if you've been to Brian Shamblin's talk, you're familiar with this project. But we participate in a project with the University of Georgia called the Northern Recovery Unit. So this is a genetics project that is using sea turtle eggs to track mother sea turtles in their nesting range. And so we're able to get this really amazing information and amazing data about the nesting habits of these endangered and threatened species without actually having to interact with the nesting mothers at all. Another really amazing part of our beach are our rare nesting shorebirds. So just like we hire a sea turtle technician, we also hire a bird technician who is also monitoring the beach via bicycle. And we're monitoring our American oyster catchers and our Wilson's plovers. So we're very lucky to have about 15 to 19 pairs of American oyster catchers that nest on our beach every single year. And it just proves how important undeveloped and intact beach habitat is for these threatened and at-risk bird species. So on some years, Little St. Simons can produce 50% of the fledglings for the entire Georgia coast. And so we play a really big role in the protection and the continuation of these really important species. So the last habitats that I want to talk about are our man-made or man-altered systems. So all this time, I've been talking to you about ecological intactness and how everything is so perfect and it all looks so excellent. But I want to be transparent in that we do have habitats that we have altered in some ways. And so one of my favorite examples is our large wading bird rookery. So this is called Norm's Pond. It was actually a borrow pit. So it was dug out with the intention of using that sediment to build up the road. And then it was fed with fresh water through an artesian well with the intention of stocking it for fish to go fishing. So that's the purpose that it served for a very long time. At some point, we started to notice that these wading birds, so great egrets, wood storks, and hingas, were nesting on the edge, on the perimeter of this pond, but they were getting predated by raccoons pretty much immediately and having very little success. And so what we did was we actually created these islands in the pond to mimic a natural wading bird rookery. And so now we have 3 wading bird islands. So this is just one of them. And we are so fortunate to have such high success now at our wading bird rookery. So we have great egrets, snowy egrets, wood storks, tricolored herons, cattle egrets, black-crowned night herons, and we are one of 4 spots in Georgia that has roseate spoonbills that nest consistently at our wading bird rookery. So we're very lucky that we were able to take an area that was built for a different purpose and pivot and be able to create a safe haven for these important birds. Another man-altered system that I'm going to talk about is what we call Myrtle Pond. So this is a 90-acre salt marsh impoundment. So again, this was built, so there is 2 dikes that impound the salt marsh, and then within those dikes are rice gates, so water control structures that can alter the water level within the impoundment. They were put there specifically for duck hunting. So they wanted to be able to keep the waters really high all year round to attract ducks so they could hunt them. And obviously, as we've sort of pivoted our stance from hunting towards conservation, we've been able to pivot those uses as well. So now we use those, we haven't removed them, and we continue to use them for targeted management. And so this is an overview of the pond. And so right now, we're getting into spring migration. And so what we're doing is we're starting to lower that water level. We want to expose a little bit of mud so that any migrating shorebirds can come in and start to forage in that mud. As we get later on into spring and into summer, we're going to drop it down even further so that we can protect things like nesting black stilts and nesting least bitterns as they have their eggs and raise their young in Myrtle Pond. As we get into later summer and early fall, we're going to start to raise it up a little bit because we're going to have alligators that are nesting, and we want to create island pockets for them so they can be protected from predators. And then as we get into winter, we're going to raise it up all the way to create a safe haven for migrating and wintering ducks. And then again, the process repeats itself all over again. So again, it's an excellent example of how we were able to take something that maybe wasn't, built or had an intended use for conservation and take that and pivot that and use that to our benefit. So that's my talk. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Are there bats? I mean, we have forests like that on jungle. Do you have those yellow bats?
Yeah, you probably have those yellow bats. They are not necessarily a rare species. So you probably have several bat species. So you might have yellow bats, evening bats, Seminole bats. They often are roosting in the Spanish moss, and so our bats, since they don't have caves, have to find other refugia to nest in and to take shelter in the daytime. And so we found a lot of times bats are using Spanish moss in the trees to roost in. So yeah, good question.
Are there facilities if you wanted to stay overnight, like on Cumberland? Do you have facilities?
Yeah, totally. So like I was kind of explaining at the beginning, the island has the Ecology, so you can make a reservation, and it operates just like a hotel. And so we have guest accommodations where there are very nice guest cabins, and you can come and you can stay. All of your meals are provided while you're on the island. And then, of course, we have the team of naturalists who take you out on activities like beach hiking and fishing, kayaking, that kind of thing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What's the long-term stewardship plan for this? I mean, Paulson's not a young person either.
Yeah, good question. Very good question. So the island, and I get this question a lot. I think a lot of people, especially if they're on the island, visit and are like, well, this is great and it's nice now and you're here and you're protecting it now, but what's it gonna look like 50 years down the line? And so the biggest piece of mind that I can offer you is that the island was actually put into a conservation easement when the Paulsons became majority owners in 2007. That conservation easement was donated to the Nature Conservancy at the time, and so the Nature Conservancy holds a legally binding document that will protect the island in perpetuity. So a conservation easement pretty much sets the standards for the land and wildlife stewardship that we're executing on the island. And so there are very stringent restrictions and requirements for how we're operating and how we're going about the activities that we are on the island. And the Nature Conservancy is the governing body on that document. So as long as the Nature Conservancy holds that document, the island will be protected from things like development for as long as the Nature Conservancy is around. Good question.
Did Major Butler live on the island or the plantation in Darien?
Yeah, Major Butler never lived on the island. We don't have any history of that. Like I said, there is a history of 11 enslaved people on the island, and there was an overseer who would have lived on the island.
So nothing was ever built.
Correct. Yeah. Yes.
I have an online question.
Okay.
Asking, could you explain how Little St. Simon's got its name?
Oh, good question. So yes, I don't necessarily have the perfect answer for you, but it was born out of its relation to St. Simon's Island, right? So we're right next to St. Simon's. We're kind of on the northern extent of St. Simon's, and so we're just often called the Little Island. And so I think Little St. Simon's was just an extension of the Little Island that officially became Little St. Simon's. Good question. Okay.
Over your last 2 years, what has been your favorite memory moment?
Ooh, good question. I think maybe my favorite moment, I was out on the beach early in the morning. I was biking, the sun was rising, and there was a female loggerhead sea turtle that was crawling out of the water, and I stopped a long ways away and I watched her go through her whole nesting sort of dance, and I got to witness all of that. And then I watched her as she slowly just crawled back into the water and disappeared out of view, and there was just me and her and the sunrise, and it was very magical. Yeah, it was, yeah. Wow. Okay, thanks everybody.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. That's okay.
Another online
That's
question.
okay.
This one asks, is there any way to get involved with the island or help with research that's on?
Yeah, also very good question. So yeah, definitely reach out. My email is listed on the website, and I'm always happy to answer questions, whether that be about volunteer opportunities or just being involved or how you can learn more. Please just send me an email, call the office phone number, and they can connect you with me. Yes, happy to answer any questions surrounding that.
That includes like volunteer, if you'd like to volunteer.
Yeah, yep. So I run the volunteer program, and so if you email me, I'm the woman to talk to. So that's perfect.
I would like to add kudos to the team there at Little St. Simon. Becky and I were taking a master's naturalist class, and we were, I guess we're privileged to be there for just like 3.5 hours.
Yeah,
sort of
yeah.
teaser. And you and everybody was so awesome.
Wow,
If
appreciate
anybody
that.
get a chance to get there that hasn't and stay over, that's all I'm
Oh, I appreciate that. Well, thank you. So, okay. Thanks everybody. Appreciate that. Happy to answer more questions.